So this unit is all about what's important. What's important to you in your life? Perhaps you have things that are important like having food or shelter, but you also may have hobbies or interests or people in your life that are important to you. So this unit is connecting what's important to you with what's important to characters and other people in our readings. So the first lesson you will go through is lesson 1.01, and in this lesson you will be reading a story called President Cleveland. Where are you? I always like to highlight these key words that you should be paying attention to as you work through your lessons. These are words that really should be written down in your notebooks or on your index cards, however you take notes, but you should understand what a protagonist is. You should understand what the setting is, and you should also understand what a sympathetic narrator is. It's also important to note your lesson goals and your lesson standard, so that way at the end of the lesson, you know that this is like an arrow. It's your target. You should be able to use reading strategies to help you comprehend text. You should be able to determine evidence that supports stated or implied ideas. And you should be able to understand how characters, events, and ideas interact and affect the plot of the story. These are all things that you might be assessed on at the end of a unit, right? If you're ever taken an English course before, you understand that you're going to be asked about these types of lesson goals. So make sure you're paying attention to those and reflecting and assessing your own knowledge of how do you feel about them as you work through your lessons. So this reading is a historical fiction genre, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, make sure you're paying attention to vocabulary words and keywords in your lessons. Your lessons give you great ideas to help you maybe come up with connecting vocabulary words or key ideas. So make sure you also take the advice of the lesson. Maybe you could create your own concept maps to help you understand different keywords or vocabulary words in a lesson. And you'll notice here it gives you what affects the plot of a story. Remember, the plot is anything about, here's my plot diagram. We have our exposition here. We have our complicating incident, our conflict, our rising action here. This is my plot diagram. We have our climax, which is the turning point of the story, our falling action here, and our conclusion or resolution here. So there's different elements that go into this. We have characters, settings, conflicts. You could even think of dialogue. All of these things, that would be character interaction, affect the plot in some way. At the end of lesson 1.01, you will be engaging in a discussion. So in this discussion, you're going to address these 3 bullet points right here. Your post should have an explanation on how a fictional story could transform or change history. Discuss the accuracy of historical fiction, explaining whether you believe it is misleading or not. So choose a side, yes or no, and then be able to explain why. Make sure you also answer this question. Is the author responsible for being accurate, or is it the reader's responsibility to understand? So again, choose a side. Is the author responsible for the accurate information or reader? Maybe you think it's both, but make sure that you answer that last question there. With all discussions in our class, make sure along with your original post that you are posting 2 responses to your peers' posts. These might not appear until you post your own response, so make sure you post your own response first. And remember, here's my discussion post etiquette for you. This was in English 7A's course, but it has you look at the meaning of a discussion. It's to engage in conversation. This is actually really good for your brain. It helps things stick better in your memory and helps you draw connections and relate deeper meaning to the concepts being discussed. I'm going to look at these 2 characters. I really want you to pay attention to these 2 characters. You're going to be assessed on them at the end. You're going to be assessed on their relationship. How do they change throughout the story? Think about how do they change. There's a theme that we can pull out of this story, and themes aren't usually one word, but this is an overarching category: maturation or maturity. So think about who's mature. Is Armand mature? Is Jerry mature? Are they both mature? Or maybe throughout the story, they mature. And when I'm referring to the word mature, I'm meaning you're able to see things from more of an adult perspective. You can have a more reasonable outlook on life, right? As we grow up, we become less selfish. We start to think of others. We make more responsible choices. That falls under the category of becoming more mature. So think about that, and think about how maybe they help one another, how they maybe are opposites of one another. All of those things, their relationship is very important to pay attention to as you read. Again, I want you to identify the plot of the story, and maybe you can connect it to your own experiences. You'll notice that lesson 1.02 talks about plot development, central idea, setting, and theme. Okay, the learn categories are your friends. Hi everyone, welcome to this flipped instructional video for Middle School English 7B, lesson 1.03. This is Mrs. Alexander. Let's get started. In lesson 1.03, you'll be reading a poem called My Father is a Simple Man. This is a free verse poem, and identify why there's rhyme scheme, what type of meter is in a free verse poem, and then it also has you looking at the mood and the tone of the poem. Now, mood is how you feel, and tone is the author's feeling towards the subject. Make sure you check for comprehension as you are going through this lesson. Other things to note in this lesson are connotation and denotation. These are things that you want to make sure you really understand, because you will be asked about this again. So denotation refers to the concrete meaning of words. I like to think of it as like the dictionary definition. I like to use D and D for that. Connotative language, on the other hand, evokes emotion. Big ideas addressed in lesson 1.03. We read a free verse poem, so we're looking at free verse poetry. Theme, as always, textual evidence. We also explored connotation and denotation. Hello, welcome to this flipped instructional video for Middle School English 7B, lessons 1.04 through 1.05. This is Mrs. Alexander. In this lesson, you'll be reading a short story called Raymond's Run. I really like this story and can connect to it because I ran track when I was in school, when I was in middle school and high school. And this short story, I will tell you, is about a girl who likes to run track. Again, it's always helpful to visualize as you're reading. This is an active reading strategy. So sometimes I encourage students to read a paragraph and then close their eyes and visualize what just happened in their mind. I know we like watching movies or TV shows, so oftentimes the visual thing happens for us. But if you can get your brain to practice visualizing what's going on in the story, it'll really help. In this lesson, we're also talking about first-person point of view. In first-person point of view, we're going to be seeing words and pronouns. I like to shorten it here, like I and me. That's because the narrator is talking from their point of view. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're talking from first person point of view in this lesson. 1.04, I want you to read Raymond's Run up until you learn Squeaky's real name. So you're not reading the whole story, you're only reading part of the story. After you get to that point in the story, and again, make sure you're looking at your lesson introduction, your vocabulary words, and after you're done reading, you're going to look at how the character changes throughout the story. This is something that I want you to really keep in mind. So the big ideas addressed in lessons 1.04 through 1.5 Raymond's Run, we're looking at the main character, okay, and how she develops. So character development. You also explore theme and plot development and elements of plot. So keep that in mind as you're working through these lessons. I hope this video helped. As always, happy learning!